Hi, Dani.
Hi, Kristin.
Good to see you. I have to say,
Same.
it looks like you are hanging out in an amazing nightclub right now. Like, there's like the brick with like an
Nightclub
big
downstairs in
glow.
a warehouse.
Well, welcome. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Thank you for agreeing to chat. As you know, I've been on this kind of like listening tour of women I respect and admire that have had these really interesting leadership journeys. And of course, you were one of the first folks that popped into my mind, just given everything that you've done, both in your personal life and in your career. So I'm just really excited to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. It's been fun to know you through the journey
I was
and
going to
to
say,
see your own journey.
I was going to say how many, so I was trying to think about this because I usually will just share a little bit of kind of how I know the person that I'm chatting with. And I could not remember how many years it's been, but it's been a lot of years. And I think maybe a decade that we've known each other, maybe more even.
I think a decade sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
hmm
Okay. Which I get in the scheme of life doesn't seem like a lot, but when you have been through some kind of like professional
For
evolution,
sure.
one, it feels like a very long time. So I met Dani when she was the policy director for the Central Valley Community Foundation. And for those unfamiliar, that is based in Fresno, California, which is in the heart of California, that we like to say, the San Joaquin Valley. It's a beautiful, beautiful region with tons of energy being poured into it, lots of evolution as a city itself. That Dani has kind of been at the forefront of in one way or another. And a former colleague of mine and I were working on a series of events across the state all those years ago. And the two people we were told we had to meet were Dani and Gretchen Moore with the Community Foundation. But I got to know her as just being that really interesting mix of crazy smart, passionate, and super fun to be around, which those things don't always come together in that way. So I've just had the privilege of knowing her and just had this really great partnership over the years that has had its ebb and flows. But over that time, she went from being this incredibly wicked smart, into the policy, all the wonky stuff that most people don't understand, Dani gets. And she went on to launch one of Fresno, I don't know if it's one of or Fresno's very first nonprofit newsroom.
Yeah. Valley Public Radio is an excellent nonprofit newsroom here in Fresno. And then we also have our home to Radio Bilingüe, which is a Spanish language public radio.
Okay, okay. And you were amongst one of the first to really be thinking about what it means to bring some of these policy conversations to the nonprofit journalism space, which I think, that is building anything takes a certain amount of grit and determination. Building a newsroom is an entirely different animal. And I come from the media and journalism space from many moons ago and just acknowledge that it's a tricky landscape. We don't, so much has changed over the last 20 years as it relates to how we consume information, the platforms we get our information on. So for you to insert yourself and know that there was a need at that moment and to see what you've built since then has been really incredible. So I think the jump from, policy wonk at a community foundation to launching a newsroom, maybe not the through line that everybody would expect. So give us a little background and kind of what got you going.
Yeah. So it's so good to be here and to talk about this. And since you and your colleagues have been part of a lot of my origin story for Fresnoland, it's kind of fun to come full circle and talk about it with you. So my background is as an urban planner, and I have a master's degree in regional planning. I've worked in a lot of different contexts as a planner, and anything from, think tank work, state and federal policy around housing and climate change and transportation. I worked in the mayor's office here in Fresno as a policy advisor to one of the former mayors around housing, climate issues. I worked, like you said, at our community foundation. I ran a local ballot measure in Fresno for local parks. I ran a participatory budgeting process here in Fresno. So I had a lot of different experiences across the sort of policy spectrum from local all the way up to federal that just every time always got me thinking about this disconnect between how people experience their city and community, and how they think about how they can shape what they want to see in local government, and how those conversations actually happen
Mm-hmm.
inside inside the buildings of power. And always felt like if people actually understood what was happening behind closed doors with decision makers and other influential people, they would just have a really different perspective and think differently about the process.
Mm-hmm.
And and so, initially, because when you're an urban planner, you see urban plannery things to do. I was like, I'll build a think tank, And I had lived in the Bay Area for a while. I lived in Oakland, and the Bay Area has Spur, and Spur is like a local think tank, and they do white papers on, how do we build more affordable housing, or how do we make more parks accessible to people and things like that. And that works for the Bay Area, and that works for San Francisco, Oakland. But that sort of format of research via white paper is not Fresno. Like, Fresno is a super diverse, young, working class, predominantly working class place that it just needed a different sort of platform to do that work. And so I had kind of started to write a business plan for what I felt like Fresnoland should be. And I remember bringing it to you and your colleague Joaquin, and sort of like tossing it around, and you guys were like, "Oh, this is public service journalism." And I'm like, "No, it's what? No." And at the time, like the Fresno Bee, which is like our major metro paper, was kind of in free fall. Oh, I guess not free fall isn't the right word, but it had hemorrhaged a lot of longtime staffers. Not anything specific to the Bee, more just like the general
General.
trending
Yeah.
for
Right.
every single
Every newspaper.
legacy media outlet in the US.
Right.
And so I was, what I wanted to see wasn't reflected necessarily in what the Bee was putting out at that time. And, there's also been a trend just in political journalism in particular to be really horse racy. And when elections are covered, it's like, how much money are people raising and what are the polls saying? But nothing about like the substance of what politicians are actually proposing. And that just always annoys me to no end. And so, but anyways, you guys had kind of encouraged me, like, hey, you should just talk to the Bee and see what they think about this. And maybe they'll want to publish what you guys produce. And I was in that time period, I was pregnant with my second kid, with my daughter. And I remember waddling, literally waddling. I was probably like, 5 or 6, maybe 7 months pregnant, into the Fresno Bee and talking to the executive editor at the time, and kind of like, hey, they said I should talk to you about this thing that you might want to publish. And I kind of like fully expected to get shut down, and that didn't happen. And they were like, he was like, sure, I'll entertain this. And so I spent like the next year fundraising and talking to philanthropy about it, and was able to get about around $200,000 in seed funding. And so it gave us enough of a runway sort of to launch in 2020. Of course, our launch party was, I think, 2 weeks before the pandemic shut
I was
down.
just gonna say, it was like right around that time, right? Yeah.
It was. And
Yeah.
so, like, we had this party downtown, and it was all fancy. And then the pandemic happened, and quickly it was like, everyone in journalism in the pandemic wanted to be useful,
Hmm.
uh, because there was just so much misinformation, or just like panic. And so we kind of quickly pivoted into being very service oriented in the early days. Like, here's how to get access to employment resources. Here's how to get access to resources that can prevent you from getting evicted. Here's how the new laws around evictions work right now. So we just ended up doing a ton of explainers, a ton of service guides. And then eventually, kind of once the pandemic kind of settled into what it was and its ultimate peter out, we got to finally get back into an investigative space, which is where I think my personal passions lie. And I learned really quickly, I learned how to be a journalist on the job running this little team, and which is a whole journey. Thank you, Fresno Bee, for letting me experiment in your four walls. But journalism and research are really similar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way I talk about it is, journalism is just research in the public interest and with like a public audience. And when you're a researcher as an urban planner, like in a think tank, your client at the end of the day still is the funder,
Yeah.
right? You're still kind of saying like, hey, I got this grant to do this study on where we might build affordable housing, but your client is still top of mind in terms of like what they want to see out of the report. Where in journalism, we'll still do very research heavy projects. We have a story coming out this week that's like an explainer in how the fire zone designations have changed a lot in Fresno Madera County recently, which is a great research project. There's a lot of hours of time to analyze the maps and how they've changed. But our client is the public. It's like, what does this mean for you in a practical way? What can you do about the changes? What do they mean in terms of like building code changes or, and so I really appreciate that purity of I don't even know how to say it, purity of like cause and purpose, where at the end of the day, I'm only accountable to the public and that's who really matters.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much because I think the plot has been lost a little bit,
Yes,
unfortunately, with journalism and what we think of it, how we think of it in our lives, and what the importance of it is in our lives. And regardless of whether or not you subscribe or read your local paper, which, come on, y'all, get back on
please
the
do.
board.
Please do.
But they show just how, I mean, statistically speaking, when you are lacking in these investigative projects or the deep research that you all are doing or what local papers are doing, corruption goes up. There is all kinds of things that happen within your city because there are no watchdogs making sure that people are acting in your best interest, because they're not going to be always. Unfortunately, we've lost a lot of that. So it's incredible to see the work you all are still doing, because it's so important, especially as we see what's happening on a political landscape. And not to make it political, but truly when we think about people are operating from literally different sets of truths. And so how do you get into civic discourse when we're not even coming from the same place, So
Totally.
it's such a critical
Yeah.
service. Also, I have my own parenting story from the Fresno Bee, which was I had just had my second child and was coming into the Bee to work. I was doing some work with McClatchy, which is the publishing arm that owns, the bees at the time. And I had to breastfeed or I had to pump because I was breastfeeding. And it was like the saddest, like, oh yes, we'll take you up to like I don't know, like 10th floor where it's been abandoned for 20 years and there's like no door and it's like vacant. And I was like, a ghost is 100% coming to get me in this moment. And it was
1000%.
before the wearables came out, so you were like hooking a bra up to like the thing, and it was, I mean, oh my god. The things we do.
I know. That's like a whole thing, like the weirdest places you've pumped or
I
breastfed.
know.
That's yes.
I do think that is such an important, not every working woman is a mom, but there is always something outside of the workplace that they're carrying, whether it's caretaking for a parent or it's building in their community or being in partnership. And so, how have you found, I don't say balance anymore because I think that that's a misnomer for me. I think of it more as harmony. Like, how do I think about how all of these elements try to be in service of each other or support of each other instead of
For
like
sure.
fight against each other constantly? Those early days, I mean, to build a business with a toddler and a newborn, give us some highlights.
Oh, wow. I mean, I'm pretty honest about the fact that I probably, if I would have known in hindsight what it was going to be like, I wouldn't have done it again.
Yeah.
Um, it was just insanity during a pandemic. Like my son's preschool closed. My daughter was 1 when the pandemic happened. I'm leading this new team in this organization that is very male dominated. No women in leadership except for myself and the editor that I had hired. We were the only women in leadership. And so not exactly like a super mom or woman friendly environment. And I'm also new in the industry.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that was deeply intimidating. I remember being just like very gently chastised one day for being slow
Slow
in
in what way? Like slow moving or slow talk? Like slow.
Slow and turning around stories on deadline. Because
Ah,
I report, and that's something I will always do because I think it's important for, at least for me personally, that I'm still doing the work that my team does to keep myself fresh. And I enjoy it. I enjoy reporting. And I just wanted to scream when this person kind of chastised me for being slow to be like, I have two children under the age of 5 at home because can't have caretakers.
mhm.
Um, I am also raising money for this thing because you guys aren't paying for it. I am also running a team of 3. So
Yeah.
like, could you respectfully back off? Um,
Were you
so
able to share that in some way? Because I think it's interesting when you're saying, you're a lone female in this space. How did that feel trying to kind of like advocate for yourself in that way?
I really struggled in the beginning to know how to advocate for myself again because it's such a new industry.
Yeah.
And journalism, as you know, prides itself on not being very boundaried.
Mm,
And
yeah.
people pride themselves on burnout. People pride themselves on we work harder than everyone else. And I think what helped me was to be like, guess what, everyone? I come from working for Fresno's highest ranking elected official who is kind of known for being one of the hardest working grinder people in town. I know what it's like to work hard. I can do it. I've done it before. And she would run circles around most of you. So you don't really get to tell me what working hard looks like. I know how to do it.
Yeah.
So that gave me some confidence, but it's different to like have that internal confidence to be like, they just don't know what they're saying. And then to vocalize in a respectful tone, like, no, thank you. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess at the end of the day, they weren't paying my salary. I had raised all of my own salary and my team's salary. So like they could tell me stuff, but at the end of the day, I'm like, you're not signing my checks. I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
care.
Can
I
we
sign my
get
checks.
can we give an actual shout out? Can we name this grinder right now? Or
Ashley Swearchin, yeah, she is queen of the grinds in Fresno.
she is
But
amazing.
yeah, so that was definitely interesting to navigate those dynamics in a very male dominated environment. But I think over time, I've just and like during the pandemic, like so many of us, we just had to be super boundaried, right? Because we didn't have childcare. So my husband and I would do shifts, and I would do like, I work 8 to 1, and then you work 1 to 6. And that really taught me super fast how to be hyper efficient
Yeah.
in because I wasn't getting 8-hour days. Like that was just not happening.
Right.
And and my kids did not let me work while being in the same room. Like that was just not, I mean, my colleagues from that era could tell you all the times that they could overhear my kids talking about like wipe my butt or that was just like not a thing. So I just learned how to be really boundaried and I still am to a certain extent today. Like I don't work for the most part after I'm home with my kids.
Hmm.
I am not one of those people who does a second shift. I used to be, and I'm a person that needs a lot of sleep, like 8.5 to 9 hours a night. So every once in a while, like this morning, I got up early because I had some work to do, and so I was in the office early. I said hello to one of my kids before I left. So like I'll do that sometimes, but
It's
I'm
not the
not.
norm. It's not what you've created as your norm. Yeah. I think
No.
it's so easy to fall into that trap because especially if you're building something or you are growing something that you care deeply about, it can be difficult, I think, at times, right? Because even sometimes it doesn't feel like work. You're like, well, it's exciting and I want to do this thing, right? But so to put it down and to make space for all these other things we care about, right?
And I think my husband and I had to have really hard conversations about, I give him a lot of credit for being the person that's like, the work that you're doing is really important. And I get that you're, working towards world peace, whatever it is. And he's my biggest defender,
Yeah.
champion, whatever. And he's like, you need to be a present parent, full stop.
Yeah. I love that though. We need that, right? I think sometimes that counter or the reminder, the foundation
Yeah.
to come back to. Do you feel like I'm curious about this because I think this has rung true for me, but one of the silver linings of the pandemic as a working parent has been some of the like veneer of professionalism got rubbed right off. It was like, listen, y'all, we all have lives. You can see my life. You can see my dog. You can see all of this chaos behind me. I'm trying to keep my 9-month-old entertained with a salad spinner that he decided to bang instead of spin. And so you're like witnessing all of this. And, I do feel like it shifted something for people where we are more open about the fact that we have full lives. I know this cannot be true for every industry, obviously, but those that I've been a part of and those that I've seen, it feels like there was a ease a little bit around what it means to come to work as our whole selves.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. But I also tend to be a person, for better or for worse, that really wears my emotions on my sleeve. And I think that the pandemic just really wore so many of us raw,
Yeah.
right? Like we were just barely holding on by a thread, so many of us. And I think that while the human exposure was super helpful in breaking down a lot of walls and like seeing people in their more full space, my reaction to it has kind of been like, ooh, I mean, yeah, that was good, but also I don't really need everyone to see my whole
The whole thing.
personal life
Yeah,
either. So I've
totally.
actually closed up a little bit more since then. And
Interesting. That's really interesting. Is that something, because I was going to ask you on your leadership journey and your career path, like, have there been elements of yourself and the way you want to lead that have either been surprising to you or that you've learned about yourself that you're like, oh, maybe that was always there, but it's showing up in this way, or I want to double down on this thing because it actually feels more important to me than I would have expected?
yeah, and a couple of things. I grew up in a house that really valued or equated truth to saying everything on your mind.
Mm,
And you weren't being truthful or honest. And honesty and truthfulness was a big value in the house I grew up in,
mm,
but you weren't being honest or truthful if you didn't say everything. And I think that as a leader, initially, I really leaned into that and I would just say everything.
mm,
And I saw it as I'm building honest communication because I'm sharing everything that I'm thinking. And I'm sharing both maybe sometimes critical things, sometimes positive things, but I'm also sharing my own vulnerabilities. And if I do enough of that, people will see me as not like a dictator or like a authoritarian leader, but very much as like of a leader of empathy and connection.
mhm.
I actually don't think that that served me well in many ways
Interesting.
because it ignored the power dynamic that is just there.
Mm,
And I think I really was fearful of being perceived as this like top down authority figure. It was a very, very uncomfortable thing for me to kind of step into my leadership, partially because I was new to the industry. And so I had a lot of imposter syndrome around that, partially just because, I like many people in the journalism industry, have my own issues with authority. And so I'm like, I can't be the very thing that I hate myself.
yeah.
Um, and so it took me a while to realize like it's, and I'm still fine tuning this obviously, but people want clarity, but they don't need to know everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
What's the balance, right? Yeah.
yeah, people want empathy, but they don't need to always hear your 10-minute rationalization of why you made a decision. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you can just be like, this is why we're doing this. This is
Mhm.
why I think it's the right decision. Give them a space to push back.
Mm.
And then you don't, even if they push back, you listen. And sometimes you say, okay, I heard you. I'm going to make a modification. And sometimes you say, I hear you. And also, I'm not going to take your suggestions. And this is why. And maybe we can revisit this in 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I've just got more comfortable at that, but I've had a lot of internal work to step into my own power and to be like, I may not have been in the journalism industry for 20 years, but I know Fresno. I love my community. I care about the values of journalism deeply. And for all of those reasons, I am the right person to be leading this right now.
I love that. I feel like we can sometimes conflate vulnerability with being a fully open book or like and I think there's a way to be vulnerable without having to like strip away every piece of us and share every raw moment. And, it does require strength in your own kind of vision and your kind of like inner knowing, I guess, so to speak, to be able to make decisions and say, like, this is still coming from a vulnerable place because I care deeply about what I'm doing. But you don't necessarily need to know every if and or why to every single thing. And I think leaders really just across the board, industry, non-specific, struggle with that at times because you do want folks to be excited about the work they do, bought into the work that they do. And so I don't know that there is, right, like that perfect tone. And it's a constant, probably like tightrope that you're navigating around how much is enough, but how much is too much. And I do think as women in particular, we want to make everybody feel part of it.
We are conditioned to constantly read every single room intuitively.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm always like, the vibes are off on that
I
person.
know.
What's actually going on? I'm always doing that.
Like too
And
distracted by people's faces. I'm like,
so distracted. And it is, on the one hand, a superpower for a lot of reasons, but sometimes you just have to be like, I'm going to be okay with the fact that that person is in a bad mood for things that are
whatever.
out of my control.
Totally.
And that's okay.
Totally. I know sometimes I used to get so irritated with myself. I'm like, who am I to think that it's even about me? It's likely not.
Right.
Like what kind of narcissist is this always about?
Yeah. And right. And similarly, I've had a hard time expressing, like, accountability has been a hard thing for me to learn. Both, I mean, holding myself accountable is one thing, and then holding other people accountable has been hard too, because people need clarity. And sometimes people just don't always know what the line is on, hey, I need to improve on this. And it's not, I mean, Brene Brown in one of her books said, like, clear is kind.
Yeah.
And I really believe that people need to know where the bar is so that they can reach it. And I personally always want to know if I'm not meeting expectations, and most people want to feel the same way.
Yeah.
And we're not doing anyone any favors if we're just trying to dance around their feelings and not hurt them if we say, hey, you didn't meet the mark on this.
Yeah.
It's not personal.
Totally.
And I always try to preface comments like that with my team by saying, I know you guys work hard. I'm not sitting here worrying about whether you're working hard enough, whether you care about the work. So once I get that out of the way, then they don't feel like it's a personal attack on their effort or their work ethic. It's like, I assume you have a good work ethic and that you just didn't know that that's a big deal.
Totally. Well, and I think most driven people actually want ways to improve, right? They're actually looking for ways to be better or set a different standard or a higher bar. And so I do think it's not just accountability, but it is also like developing people and giving them the opportunity to rise up, because otherwise, what's the point?
Absolutely.
Has there been anything that you have found gets misinterpreted when you've seen other women in leadership? I was having another chat with a woman who was high up at Amazon, and she heard through the grapevine that one of her reviewers called her shrill because she spoke up too much about the potential backlash in some of the work they were doing legally. And she's like, this is literally my job, is to make sure that I'm voicing into things that might be a problem. Have you seen that happen in spaces where you're like, that's not what that is, it's actually this other thing, but because she's a female leader, it's showing up as something else?
1000%. It's my job as a journalist to be direct, to ask direct questions, ask sometimes pointed questions, and to not let people bullshit. And I carry that ethos from my journalism into the work I do on the business side as well. And many times women are taught to use hedging language. Please, would you consider? Have you ever thought of? Could you suggest this? And to also be very deferential to men around us for a variety of reasons. And I mean, you know this about me, Kristin, like, don't do super well with authority. I'm like, once I find, like, I want to get things done. I'm a very activator is one of my strengths. I'm not very patient. When I see what needs to get done and I find out the path, I'm going to go find the shortest path to get there. I don't have time to deal with using niceties because someone needs it to, like, make their ego work. I'm
Mm,
like, if this is possible, let's do it. And if it isn't possible, tell me why. It's not
right.
possible. And then I'll figure out if I can change the way I'm doing something or not based on your response. So I just don't have a lot of patience for the dance.
Mm,
And that has been misinterpreted as I don't like people,
yeah,
or I'm a power driven person, or I want to be in control. If people who know me actually know I don't like to be in control of things.
that's so.
Like this is the funny thing, in my personal life, people know me as probably one of the most laid back,
Mm,
type B people of all time. It's funny to talk to my family, and they're like, it's hard for us to imagine you like being in charge of things. Um,
that's so funny. Wow, that is wild.
I'm very laid back, and so I am very offended when people are like, "Oh, you're just power hungry. Oh, you just want to control things." And I'm like, if you only knew, like, it is no, that is the farthest thing. I respect competence. I
Yeah,
want things to get done, and everything I do is in service of this vision, right? Of the way that we can bring better information, more factual information, helping empower people to get more involved in their city. That's what I'm trying to do.
yeah,
I'm just trying to find the most effective ways to do it.
totally, totally. I think it's interesting because so much of my reflection in the last year in the work I want to do and who I want to serve, it always comes down to women leaders that have a very clear true north. I don't care your industry, I don't care the specific impact you're looking to have, but you being driven by this thing, it allows for that quick decision making. It allows for finding strength. It allows for speaking into things where maybe folks don't expect you to.
And for so many years, I remember sitting in meetings when I worked at City Hall, and I'm an interrupter.
No.
Try not to be. I would literally feel my body blurting things out in meetings with like the most powerful people and literally going like this, covering my mouth because my impulse to just like not follow the rules of deference
Yeah.
and I have not made friends because I'm not always deferential to the right people.
Mm,
Cool.
yeah.
And it makes me somewhat good at being a journalist too.
Well, that's the
So,
yeah, right. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. You don't
yeah,
have to always be molding yourself to be in service of other people's comfort. That could be a whole other podcast.
yeah, right?
um, if you could share any bit of wisdom with other women that might be navigating their own kind of, I look at it more as not leadership journey, but an evolution, right? Like you have faced multiple evolutions in your career. And if you can think on those moments, is there something that you would share for somebody that might be navigating an evolution of their own?
Yeah. Ooh, I know it's easier said than done, but building some self-trust has been absolutely critical. And I used to be a person that needed so much external validation, and I still do to a certain extent, and I'm not always very proud of that. But finding those moments that you can go back to and just say, this was hard and I did this. So
Mm-hmm.
that means that when I face this other hard thing, I know I can do it again.
Yeah.
I think that has been really helpful for me because I think the other thing is like, no one is going to save you except for you.
Mm-hmm.
And not to be hyper independent, like I believe in community. And I also just really believe that we have to build our own trust in ourselves. And for so many of us, I mean, I certainly did not grow up in a household in which any of that was put in me. It was very much follow the rules, follow the patriarchal community that you're in, don't question authority ever.
Mm-hmm.
And my whole journey has been just unlearning a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and now I can see why you have a bit of a challenge with authority.
You know, when you grow up in like a fundamentalist Christian community, you are just
Yeah.
gonna
You're like,
naturally have some issues with authority.
I mean, I honestly, the self knowing and the self um, trust, those are, I think, constant themes in our lives. And that is one thing I will say that with age, it just gets better when you start to tap into that. Once the genie's out of the bottle, I feel like it's real hard to put it back in. You're like, wait a second, I'm going to start to actually listen to that little whisper, and I'm going to actually start to like almost test out, like, okay, I'm going to go with this and let's see what happens. And I think most people will be surprised if they haven't tapped into that yet to see just how well it does for them. It is not there to lead you astray. It's not there to like lead you off the cliff. Typically that knowing is there to support of something greater or something you're meant to move into. But I do think we tend to be, not just as women, but as a society, very disconnected from that inner knowing, because it is, we're constantly on the move. We're, overloaded with information. Our attention spans are crazy, right? Like demand, demand, demand. And to sit in quiet feels like a giant luxury and deeply uncomfortable at times at first if you're not used to being in that practice. But
Mhm.
to build on that and to start to see over time how those little moments where you do listen to yourself never usually turns out terribly wrong. You know?
Actually doesn't. And I feel like for people who are skeptical, like my mom is so deeply skeptical of self-trust as a concept. And it's like, it's not that self-trust means my way is the right way.
No.
It's
Yeah.
it's an intuition, it's a listening. It's like, where do I need to open space to hear this thing?
Mm.
Or, sometimes it's guidance on like this is the direction you need to go, but sometimes it's like my inner self-trust is like, you need to listen to your colleague who is telling you this concern because they
Yes.
have wisdom on this topic. And self-trust is like, it's okay to accept their wisdom and to lean
Yes.
into that too.
Yes, yes. I love that. It does not have to always be that you're right. Yes, it is literally the opposite of that. I think it is
Mhm.
that it is being
Totally.
aware enough to know. But it takes time, right? I remember when somebody asked me how I felt about turning 40 with this kind of like, how do you feel? Like it was like a bad thing. And I was like, I feel fucking
Right.
awesome. I feel better than ever. Like I feel like I have
Totally.
like way less shits to give. I see things for what they are. I'm building a community that feels authentic. Those things come with time, typically. So I look forward to just more of that, frankly, as I get older.
Totally. Yeah. And I feel like as I get older, my desire to want to have all of my life planned, understood, under the
Yeah.
reins, it's just, I keep loosening my grip every year. And it
Mm.
feels so good to like, I honestly don't know what's going to happen in 2 years from
Yeah.
now. Like,
Right.
and that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
it's there, the self-trust is things have worked out in mysterious ways in your life, and
Mm.
you have to trust that whatever comes next is the thing that is supposed to happen next.
Totally. Totally. My dad wrote me a beautiful note recently that said something to that effect, which was he continues to just believe that if you show up in service and you show up with positivity and you look for the joy, good things do happen. And not to
Absolutely.
be Pollyanna about it by any means, but I do think we get to decide on a typical day, not when we're going through something traumatic or challenging, but on your typical day to day, we do get to decide how we want to show up. And it's a choice. And it's a conscious like and constant effort, I think, at
Yes.
times. To,
Yes. Very much so. Very much
Um,
so.
last big question, and then a little mini question at the end. When I think about working with women as they're navigating these evolutions, either in leadership or whatever business that they're at the helm of, many times I talk about it as it being in service of whatever legacy they're building toward. Because if we're not aligned to what that future vision is for ourselves, then we can tend to go a little bit astray as we're building what we're building currently. So, what does building a legacy mean for you?
Like personally or for my
Yeah.
community?
No, either. You can take it any way you want.
I
No
mean,
worries.
so I come, like I mentioned earlier, I come from a fundamentalist Christian background where women don't have autonomy and are not encouraged to think for themselves. And my mother wanted to be a journalist and
Oh,
actually
wow.
was working at ABC 30 local TV station in Fresno when she became pregnant with my oldest sister. And when she became pregnant, her church leaders told her to leave her job and that
Oh,
it wasn't proper for a woman to be working while having children.
Oh my,
And
yeah.
so my mom set aside her dream. And then when I was about, 6 or 7, she went back to school to get her master's degree and she got it in mass communications and journalism.
Mm,
And so I spent a lot of my childhood learning about the theory of journalism.
mm,
And part of me feels this deep, like journalism serves this big community goal I have around everyone should have autonomy to make their own decisions about their community and to be empowered to make good decisions. And I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to give you good information to make those choices. And that's something I feel deep in my bones.
mm.
But there's also this personal tie of like avenging my mom
Yeah. Hell
who
yeah. Yeah.
who didn't get that opportunity and setting an example for my daughter who's
Mm.
6 to do the same thing. And I have a strong bent towards justice and think that journalism is a tool for justice. And I talk to my daughter about that. I talk to my son about that. And I think that that's a really deep part of what drives me at the end of the day.
Oh my God, that I did not know that about your story. And that is such a beautiful, what an incredibly powerful moment for her to see what you're building. Not only have you chosen a path that has a deep connection to her, but you're building something in service. Like that is really incredible. So much respect for the way you look at the world, and you bring so much of that unique passion to everything you do. And I think it's so cool to watch when women are leading from a place of like real authentic knowing, even if we're feeling a little crazy about it sometimes. Like it's not all rainbows and butterflies by any stretch, but like
No,
having that though, I think is what keeps you going, right?
for
Being
sure.
able to come back to that compass and that awareness. Otherwise it is crazy and hard. And so to find that foundation is such an important driver. So I love it. And I'm so excited about what you're doing. And I'm so excited about what you're doing for your community. Where
Thank
can people
you.
find you? Where can people read your great work? Where can people donate or become supporters of the work that you do? Tell us everything.
Yeah, fresnoland.org, where you can sign up for our newsletter. You can donate to the work that we do, where you can read our stories. We're also on Instagram quite a bit. Those are the two main places. And then we also have a weekly podcast you can find on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
I feel like just a little plug for anybody that's not in the Central Valley. Even if you're not in California, it's still really worth checking out their work because it really shows you what great journalism looks like. And I think if you've been craving access to incredible information and incredible stories, frankly, you don't have to be from the region to find these stories to be incredibly compelling. So, little plug if you're not in the Central Valley or even in California, still check them out because they're doing awesome work.
Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
It's so good to see you. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you so much. And I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye.